Uzma Jalaluddin, welcome back to Wild Precious Life.
Thanks, Anne Marie. I'm so happy to be here.
So, over the years, we have had listeners ask us, beg us, plead with us, will you please bring back such and such person? And we have generally declined. We've said, thank you, but no, we shan't have people back. There's a world of authors out there, and you'll just have to make do. But this is the summer when we break all the rules. It's an all star summer, and what can I say? I'm playing favorites. No, I'm just glad to have I'm glad to have a new book of yours out so that we have the chance to speak again.
Likewise, I had so much fun on your podcast last time, so I'm thrilled to be back.
Well, there's absolutely no reason you should remember ours from the thousands and thousands you've done. Every time I look around, you are writing another book or having something optioned for a film. There's lots of really great stuff happening, and so I'm just delighted to have you here. So I've read, I think, all of them, all of your romantic comedies, but your latest book, Detective Aunty, as implied by the name, is a departure, a pivot. You and I talked about it before. I'm going to call it a semi cozy mystery. After writing so many fun rom coms, did you have to take a different approach to plan and draft this mystery book?
100%. And I had no idea. I mean, plotting is plotting, of course. Every single book needs to have some kind of central through line, and you construct your characters and all of that. But a mystery is a completely different beast. And I was procrastinating, as writers do, and I basically went down like a rabbit hole of trying to figure out, well, how does one actually write a mystery? Because I've always been a mystery fan. I read a lot of mysteries, but I don't, I haven't, as you said, this is my very first foray into the crime genre. And so I looked online, I got a couple of books, and to be honest, there isn't like a really good how to write a mystery for someone who's already written books. It's mostly for brand new writers, and they're explaining things like setting and plot and character development and stuff that frankly I don't need. So if any mystery writer out there wants to write an actual good how-to manual, I would buy it. So you would definitely have one sale. Uh, so I basically had to go back to the source. I started reading and listening to a whole bunch of my book in particular is inspired by Agatha Christie's character Miss Marple. And so I went back and I listened and I read a whole bunch of my favorite mystery books and sort of deconstructed the plot. And I think ultimately most writers, that's where we get our inspiration is from, art always inspires art. So I came up with a couple of tips for myself and I figured out some of the basics of writing a mystery, and then I went from there, and Detective Aunty eventually came out of that.
I believe it. So as a reader, I feel like I read a mystery a little bit differently because I'm really paying attention because anything could be a clue, right?
Yeah.
These are not real clues from your book, but the stolen car keys or the green scarf. Like I feel like I have to keep track of all that. And I was reminded of my daughter was into mazes as a child, and so she wanted me to draw her a maze, and my approach was to draw the path from the beginning to the end first, and then I went back and filled in all the other ways. And the
Right.
child solved it in 10 seconds, right? My path, it was so my approach to the maze was just to do the thing first and then go add in all the obfuscation, and it didn't work at all. So I'm wondering about red herrings, and I don't want to give anything away, so I'm speaking quite generally here. Like, how did you throw me off the scent? Because until the very last, I mean, the very last bit, I had theories, I was paying attention to words, but how do you trick your readers? Because usually there's this compact, right? Like, I will lead you carefully through here and trust me, and I do trust you.
Yeah.
But there's a different contract with
Yeah.
readers. So how did you trick me
Yeah.
and throw me off?
I'm so glad that I tricked you because, that doesn't always happen. And in fact, most of the people that have read my book have said that they had suspicions, but they didn't, like, there was a whole cast of suspects and they weren't sure who was the person responsible. So that just means I did my job as a mystery writer, that I gave you enough to work with that you were like a little bit doubtful of who the actual suspect in the end was. And I definitely wanted to write a fair play mystery, a mystery where, it's not like some Deus Ex Machina at the end where someone just comes out of the blue and is like, I did it. I learned about this over the course of my research, but Agatha Christie famously would write the book straight from the beginning to the end and kind of have an idea of who the killer would be when they were unmasked. And then sometimes if it wasn't satisfying for her or if it wasn't enough of a plot twist, she would just change it to someone else who was the least likely suspect. Which is wild to me. Like I knew from the very beginning
What?
who I know. It's completely wild, but she was the queen of crime, so let's not, let's give the queen her due. And I knew who the person responsible was from the very beginning, and then it was just a question of what I've learned is when you're writing a mystery, it's very important for you to have, and this is the case with all books, but mysteries in particular, to have credible list of suspects. And everyone, and you don't have to have a lot. You can have like anywhere between 4 to 6 or 3 to 5, or more if you want, but definitely more than three or more. And you have to make sure that each person is hiding something, and it doesn't have to be related to the mystery, but it has to be suspicious enough that the reader can be led along the garden path. So that they think, okay, well, maybe this person is obliquely responsible because they did this or they were here, but there has to be some kind of everyone essentially is lying. Everyone essentially has a secret that they're keeping from the reader, and it is the job of your detective, your amateur detective, or your PI, or whoever the person your cop, to figure out why everyone is lying, and then you discover like little mysteries along the way. And I will say, I think I could do this not just because I'm a mystery reader. I'm a huge fan of the genre, but also because I think all of my books, even though they were rom-coms, had little mysteries inside each one of them, mysteries or plot twists or something like that. So I think I've always wanted to write a mystery, and you can see it even in my romances.
Well, I told you before we started recording that I have all these questions I want to ask you, and I'm not going to ask anything about the 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 crime, and I'm not going to spoil. But let's talk about your protagonist, right? Kosar Aunty. I feel like we have lots of 20 something women and 30 something women and even 40 something women in books, and we occasionally have, older, much older heroines. I'm thinking about Elizabeth Strout's Olive Kittredge, which was so popular, and Monica Wood wrote a wonderful grandmother in One in a Million. Boy, but I'd never thought about how there's what I'm going to call a bit of a dead zone in between what we would consider to be like middle aged and elderly. We don't even have a name for it, right? So I love that you wrote your main character right into that. She even introduces herself at one point as like an elder in the community, and someone's like, you're really not that old." So she's a grandmother, but she's how old is Koster?
She's 58.
58. So she's in her late 50s. Like, what made you want to write a lead character of this age, and what even did you learn while writing her?
Uh, that's such a great question and insight because you're right. So many books focus, especially in the romance genre. There's a plethora of 20-year-olds running around, right, who are falling in love for the first time or who are recovering after heartbreak and then falling in love. And it's so fun. Even for myself, I'm like very biased towards the younger protagonist. But the farther I grow away from my 20s, I guess I'm trying to look ahead. I'm not in my 50s yet, but I'm looking ahead to what that would be like. And more specifically, I was inspired by the women in my life. So I was looking at my mom and my mother-in-law, and they're in their 70s now, but I was particularly inspired by my mother-in-law, who was married very young. Both of my mother and my mother-in-law are both from India, and they immigrated to Canada. My mother-in-law married very young, and she married someone who was much older than her. So my father-in-law, who passed about 20 years ago, was a lovely man, very gentle, very kind. But there was a significant age difference, about 12 to 15 years, something along those lines, which was very common at the time. And when she moved to Canada and she had her children, by the time she was done having her kids, she was in her very early 20s. And so by the time he passed, because there was that significant age gap, she was only in her maybe mid 50s, and she had grown up adult children. And after she had mourned loss and grieved her husband after some time, I saw her emerge and kind of like take on this almost second act where she had, at certain points had a more active social life than we did. She had a busier calendar than either my husband or myself did. And it was really nice to see that, after basically living her life for the sake of her family for the majority of her adult years, she could now kind of concentrate on herself. And so I was really interested in that idea of that middle space for women in particular. And I was focusing on like the South Asian immigrant, in my case, Muslim experience. But this is, I think, an experience that goes across cultures. But it is like a uniquely female experience where, for a whole, but for because of the patriarchy, women spend a lot of time playing domestic roles, playing caretaking roles, but there's a moment in time where they are kind of free of that. And it could be if you have your children late, it could be in your 20s and your 30s. And if you have your children early, it could be in your 50s. And that's the case with Gosar Khan, where she now is like, okay, but who am I outside of this definition of family? And even though she didn't really do a lot of formal schooling, she is a keenly intelligent, very observant person, and she's got that auntie sense, the ability to kind of get behind the truth of things.
Yes, she's such an auntie. I love, love, love the border between like helpful, insightful, and nosy. You're so good at writing because she's not the only auntie. There are lots of aunties in
Yeah.
this book, and the oh, we're just looking after you, and oh, by the way, did you hear the gossip? Just I don't know. My when I used to sit with my grandmother and we would just chat over coffee, and we were always just talking about the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Who was marrying who was pregnant, who was going away. We're just gossiping. And I
Yeah.
never thought about how much that sort of banter, that auntie nosiness really lends itself both to a detective who's unearthing things and to how making it more difficult to figure out who done it
Yeah.
because the aunties are just up in everybody's business and so everybody knows everything about everyone, but they're all trying to solve this one crime. And
Yeah.
it's a nice construct. Will you write another?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
The ending made me, I'm not going to talk about the ending. I'm just going to say that there seemed to be room for another mystery.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm actually I'm staring at my edit letter from my editor right now, and it's very long. But I'm working on revisions for the second Detective Auntie, and I hope it turns into a series. But I'm at least contracted for two, and then we'll see what works in terms of my calendar and in terms of everything else. But yeah, I see Kosar Khan as a recurring character. I'd like to write a few more books about her. I find her fascinating, and the cast of characters around her. She has, as I said, adult children, and she's also a grandmother, a young grandmother. And, not to give too much away, but because of a personal tragedy that happened in her life about 2 decades before the start of the opening of the book, she's really retreated from most of her family members and most of her community. And now she's back. She returns to Toronto, kind of on this path of reinvention and transformation.
Yeah, that you saying that made me wonder. Most of your previous books that I've read have been romantic comedies, couples getting together, staying together. This one has there are couples who are trying to get together and couples who are staying together, but this one also explores couples who are widowed, couples who are separating, couples who are divorcing. This one runs the gamut, and it made me wonder: do you think rom-coms and detective novels are in not incompatible, but are they just different beasts? You know what I mean? Can you not have both? Can we not have like Sleepless in Seattle Murder, or like are they separate?
They don't have to be. I mean, I think, a growing genre of romantic suspense that is very popular and always has been. If you think about the category romances, the suspense novels that have like a very strong romantic story. I read several of them, and of course, I can't think of a single one. But
Isn't it funny? I can't think of words sometimes on the
I know.
podcast. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Spoon. I'll remember
Yeah.
it later, but it's okay.
And I'm reading one right now called Pomona Afton Can So Solve a Murder by Bellamy Rose, which is a pen name. But it's delightful, but it's also about like a young woman who is trying to solve a murder in her family. And you can tell that there's like a romantic subplot as well. Uh, and I think it can be tricky sometimes, like trying to balance the romantic story as well as the mystery of it all. But even in my book, I couldn't resist having like just very light touches of romance, just hints of it that I want to carry on through a couple of books and kind of see through. Um, but I don't think it's necessarily incompatible. In fact, I think a lot of romance readers kind of, like they'll read a romance and then they'll read a mystery, or they'll read another genre and then they'll come back to romance, and that's sort of their baseline. And even for me, like I'll read a whole bunch of mysteries in a row, and then I'll get tired of the genre because I want something else, and then I'll go and I'll read like sci-fi, romance, mystery. Like real readers read across many genres, though they have like a favorite. A lot of people describe cozy mysteries in particular, as well as romance, as sort of like their safe reads. They're books that a lot of people read mysteries because in a world gone mad, it makes sense. In the end, the killer will be unmasked and some sort of justice will be reached, even though that does not happen in real life. So there's a comfort to that. And in romance, you know that you're guaranteed a happily ever after, and that can be very comforting as well.
Yeah. I liked the way I'm thinking about when you mentioned the predictability of the world. Like I can open this world and I can see it going badly and I can close it and that can be on my terms. I'm thinking about some other constructs of the detective novel tend to be like the bumbling police, right? Scotland Yard can't get it right, and so Sherlock Holmes is called in. You do something different in your book here, which I really appreciate, which is the the relationship, at least in my country in America, to its police force, and especially when it comes to race in this country, has been tenuous and egregious and criminal. Pick your word. We've had real problems with that, and I'm not as familiar with Canada. But what I like what you do here is the police investigation is a light is held up to the investigative work of the police, and one of the threads that comes up is how immigrants are treated in this community by the police, and that comes into play. It's not just, oh, the police stepped all over the footprints. It's not bumbling, but it actually brings in a real thread, which is that justice has not always been served, especially to black and brown bodies
Mm-hmm.
in our countries. And I appreciated that you didn't turn a blind eye to that in Detective Auntie.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a fine line because I am writing a cozy mystery, and by definition, cozy mystery is with an amateur sleuth, right? Someone who's not. It's not a police procedural. I'm not operating within the system of a criminal investigation. I'm kind of operating outside of it. But at the same time, I did want to bring in the idea that I mean, Canada has a similar history. Just because of our smaller population, and slightly more, I don't know how to say it, more left leaning type of politics. We're maybe not as, I don't even want to say as egregious, because there have certainly been examples of egregiousness, but it maybe not as widely advertised, I guess, just because we're a smaller country in terms of population, not in terms of size. And so, but in particular, even in Canada, the imprisonment of black and brown people, of indigenous people, is twice and three times as much as that of non-BIPOC people, and it's egregious and awful. And as a Muslim woman, I know that my community in particular has been targeted in so many different ways. And but at the same time, I'm writing a cozy, so I'm not writing a political treatise, even though my life is political. But at the same time, I wanted to talk about it in a way that sort of also demonstrated, the work of the police, because we can't. we can't just, completely dismiss all of them outright. But at the same time, we can, as you said, shine a light on some of the things that do happen. So one of the characters is a police officer, but he's also Muslim, and he's from the local community that Gosar Khan is sort of returning to, the Scarborough, East End, Toronto, very very immigrant dense community, and so he is kind of grappling with the idea of like, well, I know this community intimately, but I'm also now supposed to be policing them, and it's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. This is Ilyas, and he also has, a relationship to Kosar in particular because he grew up with her children, so he knows them very very well, and so he's at times frustrated and exasperated by Kosar Khan's nosiness. That's how he considers it. But he also has this deep sense of like, I have to be respectful to my elders, and he is. So there's a little bit of push and pull there, but I didn't want to necessarily like, paint law enforcement in a completely positive or negative light, but just be like, well, this is the kind of stuff that actually happens.
Yeah, no, I think you do a really great job balancing that.
Oh,
It
thank you
does
so
it
much.
doesn't
It wasn't
read
easy.
like doesn't read like a completely fictional world. It reads like, I mean, if I hadn't had to look it up for one of your different books, I would have been like the Golden Crescent. Remind me where that is in Toronto. I mean, I think it's a
Yeah,
fictionalization of a very real place.
yeah.
I know from friends who write crime thrillers and other mysteries that they've done some dubious googling, about poisons and murder and weapons and coagulating blood. I This is a cozy mystery, but did you get to Google anything creepy?
Yeah, I mean, I did, and it was one of those situations where I was like, "Oh, I hope I don't, my computer isn't seized in some random spot check," because I was Googling things like how long does it take for a body to for rigor mortis to set in, and what are the stages of rigor mortis? And I learned way too much about that, and like, what's a good way to kill someone? How do you hide a body? Things like that. The stuff where you go into your incognito tab and you're like, "Okay, I'm just a mystery writer." And of course, it's my first mystery, so I would have a couple of raised eyebrows, like, "Don't you write romance?" Like, no, I write mystery too now. But for the most part, because it is a cozy and it's not, I didn't set out to write a very gory crime novel. Like some of the crime novels that I've read in the past have been, a lot of them are like, I'm reading it like this, and with my eyes covered because it's like, it's so disgusting. But I didn't want to write that. But at the same time, at the central heart of any murder mystery is the murder. You have to start with the body. So you have to figure out a creative way to kill someone, or interesting way.
Yeah. I'm wondering, because this is set in a place where I've met your other characters, did you envision this the same world as Hana Khan or Aisha, or did you, was Nada running around? Like I kept my ears pricked, but I wasn't reading side by side with your other books. So, did you envision this as a completely separate fictional world, or were you laying the map of Detective Auntie overlaid, say, you know, Hana Khan carries on?
Yeah, that's it exactly. I really like the fictional universe that I've created in my rom-coms. All three of them take place in this, it's everyone always asks me, where's the Golden Crescent? Is it this neighborhood? Is it that neighborhood? And it's an amalgam of a whole bunch of different neighborhoods where I've lived, where I've grown up, but it's all in the East End of Toronto. And so when I set out to write Detective Auntie, I thought, this is the perfect spot for Detective Auntie to be. And even though Gosar Khan never runs into any of the characters from my rom-coms at all, she still goes to the same mosque. She still, frequents kind of like the same strip of restaurants. And in my head, she's going to like the same places, but exists so differently. Like I think about myself, and very similar to the Golden Crescent. I live in a very diverse neighborhood, and I think about how few times I actually even bump into my neighbors at the grocery store. Like it does not happen. And yet I'm out and about all the time. My children are too. My husband is too. And it's very rarely that we even bump into people that we know. Maybe sometimes it'll happen at a Costco, everyone loves Costco. But very few times. And so I thought, this is a real life world where, and also Khosrow Khan is so much older than any of the protagonists in my other books, and age will play a role in like the places where you go and like the timings that you visit these places, and my most of my protagonists have day jobs, and Khosrow Khan is retired or semi-retired, and so all of these things take place, and when you live in a big city like Toronto is a city of 6 million people, including the suburbs. It's huge. Yeah, I know. No one
I don't
ever.
think I knew that. I was going to guess when you said six. I said, "Oh yeah, maybe 600,000." I don't. I've been to Toronto. I don't think I realized how big it is.
Yeah, we're a we're the biggest city in Canada. Vancouver probably comes second, but yeah, including all of the suburbs. It's a huge population. Very, and not super densely packed, except in the downtown core. But it's a really big city, and you can wander around for days without bumping into anyone.
It also helps understand the. There's Detective Auntie Kosar is she's looking to solve one particular crime, but as she's doing her search, she does bump up against other nefarious activity. And just, I think something you do very well is to write round characters where, again, making things up, not from the book, just because you're a lousy fifth grade teacher doesn't make you a murderer, or just because you're not good at ballet, or whatever it is, like there's just because someone isn't good at one thing doesn't make them a killer. And just because I'm stealing bicycles doesn't make me a killer. That you set it in a big enough city, and our detective Auntie is going to run into all manner of indiscretions and, in fact, other crimes. And that was, I don't know if those are called red herrings, but that made me keep guessing, because there were so many other things going down in the
Yeah.
Golden Crescent.
Yeah, definitely. Like one of the storylines in the Golden Crescent is like there's personal strife, right? So she's wondering what's going on with her. She has an adult daughter, and in fact, the book opens up with basically Khosrow Khan lives in a little town 4 hours north of Toronto called North Bay, which is a real place. And her adult daughter Sana calls her and says, "You have to come back to the city. I've just been arrested for murder." Or I'm the prime suspect in a murder investigation, and the murder victim is her landlord of her boutique, her Indian clothing boutique that she's started running. And Ghoster does not want to come back to Toronto because she has ghosts there, and she fled with her husband many years ago because she wanted to escape those ghosts. But her husband has passed, and there's no one else, and her daughter has asked for her help, so she has to go back. And so there's a lot of like navigating those personal relationships. But as you said, there's also other things happening. And one of the things that I wanted to allude to is Toronto, for instance, is I think it's like the capital of North America for car thefts, automobile thefts. Yeah. It's a huge problem. I know so many people have had cars stolen from their driveways, from shopping malls, from, just like they're parked just on the curb somewhere and their car is gone. It's a really big problem. And we don't like, there's a whole bunch of complicated reasons for it. And I was following this story in my local media for a long time. And I thought, this would be something very interesting to think about, and to kind of talk about the reasons why, for some reason, the Greater Toronto Area is a hotbed of automobile thefts. It's seen as a victimless crime in some ways, but it's not. We also have like one of the highest automobile insurance rates in the continent, probably. We pay a lot of money because a lot of our cars get stolen. And that leads into other avenues of investigation of like, the way that racialized communities sometimes are over policed because of ideas of like where crime actually takes place and what is the reality of that and what is the impact of that on the community. One of the things I talked about is how even when neighbors see crime happening, they're very reluctant to talk to the cops, because then they don't want to bring that energy into their life, because they don't know they don't actually trust law enforcement for a variety of well documented and in some cases extremely justified reasons. But they'll talk to an auntie. She has an in. What's a harmless auntie going to do? Nothing. And that's how Khosrow Khan makes her way around the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's such a great construct, and it's so incredibly true. And I found myself looking at my key fob differently, because at one point, again, I'm not giving anything away. At one point, there's a discussion about whether someone could disable or override a key
Yep.
fob. I'm in my house and you're outside, and you could zap it. And I was like, what is this? So again, maybe something you would have had to read about or Google, or maybe you do this in your spare time. I don't know.
Yeah, no, in Toronto there was a campaign with the Toronto police where they were giving away these things called Faraday boxes, which are just pouches where you put your key fob in, and it's supposed to disable, I don't know, the lasers or something that wannabe car thieves will like zap your fob and then copy the information. I'm making this up. I have no idea how this thing works, but if you put it in the pouch, it'll stop them from doing that. And some people like at one point there was this horrible situation where like the mayor of Toronto was like, "Oh, you know what? There's so many car thefts. Just keep your car keys right in the front of the door, so then there won't be a home invasion. They'll just grab your car keys and take your car." Because a lot of times, what happens with automobile thefts is they're home invasions because
Oh my
then
gosh.
they're scoping out who has like the fancy car. This actually happened to a friend of mine. She had a fancy car and she was involved in a home invasion. Thankfully, she was fine. Nothing happened, but it's an extremely, because all they want is the car, right? It's a very scary thing to do. And of course, that kind of advice got lots of backlash where the citizens of the city were like, what are you talking about? This is a problem. We don't enable the thieves by putting our keys right by the doors so they can come in and just grab the car keys. It's not like your neighbor borrowing your car to run an errand.
Oh my goodness.
Anyways, things have gotten better. I'm happy to report. Toronto is still the city of good. Overall, very, very low crime. Very safe. I always feel safe in my city. I feel like I need to stand up for my city. But this is one of the societal issues. We are a big city. So there are some societal issues. And lately, in the past, I would say 5 to 7 years, it's definitely been a real spike in automobile thefts.
One of the things I think you do well is I wonder something and then some character wonders it. So when you talked about in the book automobile crimes going up, one of the things I wondered was like, well, how do you sell a stolen car? Because VIN numbers are all like, how do you even do that? And one of the characters answers that and talks about, yeah, sometimes they're shipped overseas. Like you're not selling them in Toronto, so no one's paying attention to the VIN number in wherever I'm sending it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, they'll dupe the VIN number or they'll file it off or they'll do all sorts of different things. But a lot of times these cars end up in cargo containers and they're sold overseas, like almost within a couple of days, like your car is gone.
That's actually reminding me when I lived in Los Angeles for a few years. I don't know cars, so I'm going to use the word Escalade, and that might not be the right car, but there was a kind
Cadillac.
of
Yeah.
a kind of car with a third row seat.
Yes.
And in Los Angeles, the crime that was happening the most was these cars were being broken into, and the only thing that was being taken was the third row seat. The car was left and the seat was taken.
Weird.
And then when these folks would go to get the part replaced, there was sort of a crime spree of they were often buying back stolen third row seats because the people at the garages, how were they supposed to just get third row seats? And so there was this circle of seats being taken, and then you're buying back the seats that were taken from someone else's car. And I don't know. I like the way that quirky news items can, a writer's brain is a kind of sieve. Things come in and you're using it,
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah, I mean, this always happens when I'm in drafting mode. Everything is a cause for inspiration. I have a conversation and I'm like, oh, I wonder that sends my mind rolling off in a certain direction. Or, yeah, it's really fascinating the way that the writer's mind works in that sense. And I have a whole bunch of other storylines as well in the book, but that was one of the ones that I think anyone who lives in the city will, especially at this time, will like, oh yeah, that's really contemporary. It's very relevant to the now. And maybe in 5 years from now, Detective Aunty will be like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened in Toronto, but it doesn't happen so much anymore. But it is an interesting context to kind of set a crime scene in, because you have it's crime, but it's not necessarily violent crime. It's not like people are being carjacked. It's sort of empty cars are being, you know, liberated from their
Sure.
owners.
Sure. So you've written a number of books now. Do you have aunties or family members who assume or presume that such and such character was written after them, and then they say, "But I don't have a gray shalwar kameez"? Or like, do you have people come to you, family members or friends, who assume that you have put them in the book, even though fictionally these are all amalgamations? Or have you ever had that?
Strangely, no. And I know a lot of, I've heard anecdotally that a lot of writers get flack from their family who just assume that they're writing about them because we have no imagination. But first of all, not everyone in my family are readers. Like my dad famously is like my number one fan and will buy multiple copies of my books and loves to brag about me, but has not read a single one of my books. Because
Daddy.
he's very proud of me, very proud of me, very loving. He's great, but he's just not a reader, and he never has been. Like he probably hasn't read a book in 50 years. Maybe he's read nonfiction books. He's like a business guy. My mom always reads my books, and she's never said, "Oh, is this person so and so?" She just kind of takes the book at face value, and I guess she knows me so well. She knows that the characters are not nothing like me. I think it's more like people who don't know me who are like, "Oh yeah, Aisha is you because you're a teacher too." But my friends know that Aisha is nothing like me as a person. And yeah, so that's actually never really happened, or maybe they don't say it to my face.
I sometimes joke. I've never written a murder mystery, but I sometimes joke with my husband. I'm like, cross me again, and you'll be the villain of my next story. So I can be a little vengeful in my imagination. You do some good gender bending in this book. I'm remembering now. You mentioned your dad and business, but in this book anyway, there's a couple of things that came up. We often associate men with being the investment money makers in their family or whatever. But in this book, we see women and money, women and business. This is not me saying in any stretch of the imagination that there aren't women who do these things, but we tend to see male doctors and female nurses. And what I like the way you bend gender, whether it's a auntie detective or women who know the dollars and cents in a household. There are a lot of women business owners in this book, and there are men who are learning to cook, right? And there are, I like the way that you play with gender. And I think, especially in a book that's set in a Muslim community, I really appreciate that you are holding up a number of different ways to be a man or a woman.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a theme in all of my books, to be honest, Anne Marie. Like I've always been interested in subverting expectations when it comes to gender roles. And Khosrow Khan in particular, she was married to someone who was a medical doctor. And so they, over the course of her late husband's career, they had amassed a certain amount of capital, but her husband just kind of let the household economics to his wife because he was so busy working as a doctor, as an emergency room doctor and a family doctor. Um, and Koster had a knack for investing. Like she had basically amassed a real estate and investment portfolio by the time that her husband passed. That was many times what he made, what he earned as a medical professional. And and so as a result, I wanted her, the truth is I wanted Gosar Khan to be someone who had the leisure to be able to immerse herself in the community practices and community developments. And to do that, she needs to have money. And I thought it would be interesting if this character, who is like an immigrant woman, who is someone who she doesn't wear hijab, but she's Muslim, was kind of like the financial brains behind her family. I thought it was interesting, and I was kind of inspired by an aunt of mine in India, is well known for her stock picks. Like she was investing in stocks in like the 90s in India, and I didn't even know what investment was at that point. I was just like a young, late teens, early 20s at that point. And here she was like, oh yeah, this stock makes the greatest dividends, and this is a good staple stock, and you should buy GE and you should buy Colgate. And I was like, what are you even talking about? You can buy those things? Like my family was not like that. We would maybe open up the occasional mutual fund, and that was about it. And I found that really fascinating that a woman would be interested in that, and with the caveat that of course women are business owners and can be interested in finances, but there really is a stereotype of like the finance bro, the like the stock investment advisor. And in fact, there's a scene in Detective Aunty where she goes and talks to like this man who's clearly some kind of a wannabe finance bro, and he's giving her this terrible advice, and she's just looking at him like, honey, you have no idea. I've been doing this for decades, and I've been very successful.
I really appreciated that. I just thought, again, it made for a rich text and a rich tapestry, that it would be very easy to just be sort of singular about aunties on the crime scene. And you really do a nice job of painting the full fabric of the world and the people in it.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation, and I want to circle back to it. You said you had recently gotten an editorial letter. As a writer, I know what that is, but I'm wondering if our listeners have any idea what. Can you talk a little bit about drafting and
Sure.
the editorial process and the nightmare scenario that can be a many pages, single spaced editorial letter? But I would love for you to just speak to that to maybe folks who aren't familiar, or even those who are hoping to be familiar one day.
Oh, for sure. I love talking about craft. So in my case, I sold Detective Aunty as a two-book deal. So I knew that I would have to at some point write the second book. And so when the time came to start drafting, I fast drafted the book. And various for various writers, it can take however long it takes. But I knew that I had a deadline, so I had to hand in my book by March, April, a couple of months ago. And so I spent several months writing it and editing it, and then I sent it off to my editors, knowing that I had the manuscript at that point was as far as I had as far as I could take it without outside opinion. And so once you send it into your editor's inbox, it can be several months before you hear from them again. And in my case, it was only 6 weeks. Uh, because we're on a deadline, right? They want it out in a year. And usually you need like a good lead time of a year in order to get everything in place for a book to be published. And so I received the dreaded editorial letter. And the editorial letter can take many drafts, it can take many forms. Sometimes it can just be actual notes on your manuscript. Other times it can be a broad, literally a letter that tells you the big strokes of what worked in the book, what didn't work in the book. Other times it can be a phone call where you just kind of discuss, okay, these are some of the things that you need to focus on. These are some of the things that you need to be wary of. This is the stuff that worked, and the stuff that we loved, the stuff that we thought could be improved and tightened. And it's always a conversation. It's always a collaboration. It's not a boss telling their employee, this is what you must fix. It's very cooperative. It's very like, okay, these are our thoughts. What was your intention? Maybe tighten this storyline, eliminate this character. We would recommend you, rework this plot line. We thought that it's a mystery. We thought that this mystery through line was not fully developed. Maybe include some more clues or red herrings. It's things like that. And this time around, I wrote this book because I knew I was on a deadline very fast. And usually I do like a couple of drafts before I send it off to my editor. But to be honest, because of life things, I just didn't have the time. So I only did two drafts, and I sent it in knowing that it had pretty significant issues. And I told my editors that. And what my HarperCollins Canada editor, this is like the sixth book that we've worked on together. She knows my process. And so I got a really hefty editorial letter back. I've been ignoring it for about a week. And ignoring it, meaning that half the time the work that an author does after they get an editorial letter is in their head. Like a lot of thinking has to be done. You need a little bit of space. And writers hate getting editorial letters because it tells you everything that you did wrong in a very long manuscript. Now you have to go back and rip it apart and write it all over again. So you know that you're heading into a block of work. So sometimes we're just like, I need a minute. Let me go do something else. And then we'll go do our laundry and cook a whole bunch of meals and catch up with friends as we delay. But the editorial letter is just that. It's the next step in the process. And most writers go through at least 2 or 3 rounds of edits with their editors before the book is ready to be sent off to the next stage, which is copy editing and proofreading. Copy editing is like the spelling, the grammar, the logical inconsistencies. Wait, you said that this person you quoted this person, but they didn't exist when your book was being written. That kind of historical inaccuracies. And then proofreading is the final polish.
And I think sometimes people assume that when you get an editorial letter, it's like that, oh, the word mystery is spelled wrong, or, oh, it's
Yeah.
daytime instead of nighttime. But they can be things like, the whole premise of your book needs to be changed.
Yes.
Or in a fictional in a fictional work too, it may seem like no big deal to just tug on this. Hey, can that teenager be 15 instead of 17? But that changes every pop culture reference. It changes what they're wearing. It changes how their hair is. It changes what their room looks like. That one little tweak here can have butterfly repercussions through
Yeah.
an entire book, and it can feel like you're unweaving. If you've ever knit badly, you know exactly what we're talking about, right? You drop one stitch and it feels like the whole thing is coming apart in your hands, and you really do have to trust the collaboration and the revision and drafting process. But when you said you'd gotten a letter, I thought, oh, I know exactly where Uzma is right now. It can sting, and you have to be in your head and also be working it out in your head and also not want to do it. And
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how what your process is, Henry, but for me, I tend to just like let it sit for a couple days to a week or so, and then I have this like wave of self-loathing that rises up, and it's like you are delaying and procrastinating, and you're burning the runway that you have of the time that I have to, because of course I have to return this within a certain amount of time. And then I get so sick of myself that finally I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then I dive in. And then it completely consumes my life. And I can't think about anything else. And I'm kind of in like writing hell. And then I emerge out of it the other side. And to be honest, this is my favorite part of writing. It strangely, I'm talking about it in such a way that it makes it seem like I hate it. But actually, I love this part. I love the revision process. It just feels like this is where the book is actually forged.
the story gets so much better, and you have those moments when the characters teach you that this is what was going to happen all along. You're like,
Yep.
wait a minute, they were never reading Huck Finn to begin with. It was all it just the it's the and every time the book, just about every time, it gets better
Yes.
and
Yeah.
stronger, and it's a constraint, I think, when fewer things are possible and you have to, Houdini your way through and out. Yeah, no, I prefer revision to drafting, which
Me
is not
too.
always, doesn't mean that it's always easy or fun, but it's just you're getting tighter
Yeah.
and better. Well, I wish you well through that
Thank you. I need it.
process.
Send me good vibes.
Absolutely. Hey, we always wrap with silly questions, this and that are not about the book at all. Just you'll remember this from before. Just pick one for these, okay?
Okay.
All right. Sun or moon,
Sun.
cake or pie,
Cake. No, pie.
love. Oh, an amendment. Love or hope,
Love.
a hot chai or a cool mango lassi.
Always chai.
Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes or Murder She Wrote's Jessica Fletcher.
Sherlock Holmes.
Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple.
Poirot.
Peak Freen's Jelly Biscuit or Vegetable Korma.
Jelly biscuit.
I had to look that up because it was so particular and specific. I'm like,
Yeah.
is that it? It's
It's a
real.
Canadian biscuit. It's also a UK biscuit. I don't think you get it in the States. Yeah.
One more reason to move. If you could time travel, would you rather go forward or back?
Oh, forward.
Yeah. And who's an author we should be reading right now?
Oh, Asma Zahanat Khan is a fantastic, she's a good friend of mine, and she writes fantastic crime novels. The
Ooh,
first book in one of her latest series is called Blood Betrayal. So Asma Zahanat Khan,
all
Khan.
right. You guys, I'll link to that. What's a movie or a television show that you can never not watch if you're just passing through channels, or it's just you've seen it, but it's just like, oh, that one. I'm
I'm
gonna have to watch
rewatching The
now.
Good Place, I think, for the third time. And my kids love this show called Psych, which is about also a PI who pretends to be psychic, but he's actually just got Sherlock Holmesian kind of powers. So they watch that over and over and over again. And it was filmed in
Nice.
Vancouver.
I love that. Last one. If you could travel anywhere in the world and money was no object, where is one place you'd really like to go?
Oh, I love to travel. Lately, I've been wanting to go to Greece, just because I want to check it out, and maybe somewhere in the Emirates. I'm interested in. I've never been to the Emirates, so Dubai or Qatar or Oman sounds kind of cool. Though I'm not a big heat person, so I'd have to go in their cooler months, and I don't know when that is. Um, I'd like to go back to Australia too. I only managed to visit Sydney, so I'd like to see the rest of the country slash continent.
All right, book lovers and people who are putting together conferences in any of those places, you've just heard that Uzma will come. So,
Invite me.
yes, absolutely. Well, Uzma Jalaluddin, you begin your most recent novel with a series of dedications, including this one, quote, to all the aunties launching their second act, I see you.
Yeah.
And in addition to being a cozy mystery set in your familiar fictional neighborhood, Detective Aunty reads as a kind of permission slip written for anyone who's ever wondered, what else they might be when they grow up. So thank you for reminding us that it's never too late to embark on another journey or pursue a new dream.
Oh, thank you, Anne Marie. That was so beautifully said, and I firmly believe it.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you. Folks, Uzma Jalaluddin's new book is Detective Aunty, and you can find it and so many other great ones. You guys, Aisha at Last, and Hana Khan Carries On, and Much Ado About Nada, and I could go on, but find your favorite indie shop and pick up all of these books. And to everyone listening, we're wishing you love and light. Wherever the day takes you, be good to yourself, be good to one another, and we'll see you again soon on this wild and precious journey.